One of these days, I won't be running around pell-mell at the last minute to get everything ready. I'm very close. Two more quick places to post real fast. But they're pretty much just copy and pasting from before. More place to post. I gotta find it. Almost. This one's the easiest one to copy yet. Well, I really should have my stream handle. Man, I am such a professional. Okay. You are just in time. Hello! I gotta go back to the correct chapter. And pull up my Twitch stream manager. Stream manager. Yay! And let's stop the timer, because otherwise it'll jump scare me. We can stop the music. Hello! Welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing tonight? Hope you guys are ready for more story. Todd is doing well. Todd has a cat in his lap. He chugged a Mountain Dew an hour in advance in the hopes that, you know, maybe that'll make a difference. But I'm excited. We're getting to some of my favorite parts of the story. So I'm excited to dive in. Last time was a bit of a whirlwind. That was a week ago. Last time was a lot of Naira getting asked to look after other people's kids. It was a lot of, hey, I don't think I'm going to survive what's coming. So we think you will. when we're gone, will you look after them? And of course, Naira is the one assuming that out of all of this, she's gonna be the one that doesn't make it. So it's kind of a, well, one of us has to, hopefully, maybe. Uh, the gang kind of went and checked on Leo's mom. She's not doing well. And Moira attempted to give her a Curum treatment, but the damage was already severe. One of the downsides of Curum is that it accelerates natural healing, but it can't really help a body that already has finished healing from its own perspective. So if it can't heal scars, it can't heal things that the body doesn't consider broken anymore. So while she helped provide a little pain relief, was not able to fix what is ultimately wrong with Leo's mother. But it still absolutely made her day that she tried. There was a little bit of a pep talk that followed from both Leo and Naomi, and the group split up and headed out about their separate ways. So, we pick up now with someone we haven't seen in a little while. Naira's long-lost son, Tazael. Is my mic volume good? Is this a good, comfortable reading volume? Everyone can hear me okay? Excellent, excellent. Well, let's do this then. Chapter 43. Necessary Evolution. Present day. Tazael awoke, sliding out of bed. Having rolled too close to the edge, his balance was already forfeit, and his arms flailed uselessly in the air as he fell to the floor. His shoulder and hip took the brunt of the impact, and he rolled onto his back to take the pressure off his fresh bruises. He dreamed about Mom again. He could see her, hear her, smell her. Couldn't Anima find someone else to torment? Rubbing at his eyes with cracked palms, Tazael let out a groan. His fingers, still caked with dried blood and dirt, were sore from the day before. He'd spent the entire day prepping crystals by himself. This would be his last and loneliest morning spent in the old hideout. Naomi'd been the first to go once Rolf was taken. Erd's genetic Mueller instincts had finally kicked in, and he was convinced that the Snops were going to find and arrest him for driving over one of their own. Jurgen just stopped coming sometime last week. That wasn't much of a surprise. He joined up after Rin's death, so he was the newest addition, and fittingly among the first to flake. And then there was Siev. He'd stayed long enough to put out the word about the concert, but changed his tune after seeing what Tazael was preparing. It was Tazael's biggest project yet. His opportunity to make an impact like never before. 3 days from now, he was going to send a message to the entire bulb. That included that bracking control freak, Bradburn. Seed Mother. The moment Tazael's father was in the clear, Taz was putting a bullet in Bradburn's brain. But not before he got to watch everything that wicked man had worked for crumble to dust. He could only imagine the despair in that snappered monster's eyes when his plan blew up in his face. That revenge was going to taste so bracking sweet. It was revenge he would have to earn alone. Siev thought Tazael's plan went too far. Frankly, it wasn't far enough. A few hundred casualties was a small price to pay to get the attention of millions. If this system wasn't going to clean up after itself, then he'd run cleaning duty. Shuddering, Tazael drove his claws into his scalp. Twice. Twice now, the work Bradburn had twisted out of him had almost gotten his mother killed. He blamed himself for endangering her, but he blamed Bradburn for tearing this family apart. Oh, Fanina was too soft a future for that man. He had a debt to pay, and Tazael would see that he paid it, in full. Pulling on a shirt, Tazael let out a grunt and ground his teeth together as the fabric rubbed against the bruises dotting his torso. Could he address them with Curum? Probably, but that was a waste of time. Besides, the bruises were living reminders of his family's suffering. The time was coming to exchange an eye for an eye, or a hand for a hand. Brack! Tazael screamed, driving his fist into the metal wall. Skin split on his knuckles, and tiny streams of blood spread around his hand and his fingers. Skin split on his knuckles, and tiny streams of blood spread across his hand and fingers. That monster had taken his father's hand, then made Tazael part of the group that delivered it. To kill two birds with one stone. To remind everyone in this family who was pulling the strings that the lives and well-being of an entire Nolfin family was subject to the whims of a sneppard. They were his toys to use and abuse as he saw fit. A snarl came to Tazael's lips. Retribution was coming. 3 days from now, Bradburn's plan wasn't going to work the way he thought it would. Yes, Tazael had followed the recipe. He had a suspicion of what effects it would cause. But he would be the one selecting the targets. There was also the second crystal he'd prepared. The one for Ren. No. When it came time to pull the trigger, it would be Tazael's family that had the last laugh. His brother had wanted to change the world. Now it was time, and Tazael was going to help him do it. 3 days from now, Cyphus would never be the same. Keep clicking the wrong one. Whoopsie doodle. All right. Follow the driveway around the corner. Park in lot A, the guard at the entrance said as he handed Leo's badge back through the window. Nodding, Leo thanked him and clipped his badge back on his shirt before pulling through the open gate. His voice dropped as he muttered, Seed Mother, I'm supposed to be here, and my hands are still shaking. Holding up his hand, he demonstrated its wobbliness to his passenger. Naira glanced at him with a calm expression he wished he could share right now. We are driving right into the lair of the beast, she noted. I think it'd be more concerning if you weren't nervous. What about you? I'm too angry to be nervous. Leo chuckled. Understandable. He joined a small line of cars, heading towards a large parking area, marked by a sign with a capital A. Yes, Bradburn had several ministerial positions now, but this was an absurd amount of visitors. Bradburn's new offices loomed in the distance, a 5-story building that stretched for almost a block. If the amount of security guards stationed outside the building was any indication, Bradburn was taking the new job of internal security very seriously. Some of the guards wore paddock insignia, but most sported a new symbol. Leo had gotten a decent look at it on the guard at the gate, and best he could tell, it was a minimalist version of Bradburn's face in an aggressive snarl. It was clearly sneppered, and Leo highly doubted a man like Bradburn would use anyone else's face for artistic inspiration. Most shockingly, though, Leo spotted some Nolfs in uniform too. Despite Bradburn's general demeanor towards them, it seemed he saw merit in employing some of them. Probably a practical choice, considering the size of this place. Knowing Bradburn, he probably still only trusted his personal security to sneppards. Regardless, having Nolfs on site was a blessing in disguise. It'd make things easier for Naira. You sure you don't want me to back you up? He asked. Naira raised an eyebrow as she turned to him. I'm quite used to working alone. And you're clearly capable, he acknowledged as he pulled into an empty parking space. But being a solo responder is a terrifying thing. Working without backup is a great way to get shot or stabbed or have any number of things go wrong. People without partners have no one to pull them from the fire when things get dicey. I need to find my family, and you're supposed to talk to Bradburn. Leo groaned, leaning back in his seat. I'd really rather not. Naira gave him a polite but firm smile. I don't think we have a choice. Yeah, I know, Leo said, shutting off his repulsors and parking the car. Glancing at her, he watched her check the contents of her bag for the 4th time since the hospital. His eyes widened as she pulled out a small cigar box and held it out to him. Thought you wanted me to quit. I do, and you will, she said with unwavering confidence. Taking the cigar Taking the cigar box, he gave it a shake. The contents rattled around loosely inside. So this is me giving you backup. Opening the box, he found a single cigar nestled up against a small selection of aurum crystals and a pair of prism canisters. You know, he commented, holding up one of the canisters, Bradburn tends to shoot on sight when he so much as thinks fractals involved. Then I suggest you don't use it unless there's an emergency, but I'm not about to let you go into the lion's den unarmed. I'll have my sidearm. Even he could feel the lack of confidence in his statement, and the flat look of disbelief from Naira said she saw right through him. Nobody wants you shooting up the place. If we're lucky, this will help you keep things from ever coming to that. Ah, Leo said, swapping the canister in his fingers for the cigar. So the necrol should dull me enough that I don't do anything stupid? She shook her head. It's not intended for you. It's a blend of necrom and terram. My hope is that if you can get him to smoke it, he'll be less inclined. To kill you before you leave. And the Aurum? Naira grimaced. He won't have any Nolfs on his personal guard, so he'll be up against snipers. The face and ears are the most sensitive targets. None of those crystals are potent enough to kill anyone, unless you stuffed it down their ear or something, but they will incapacitate quite effectively. Leo's thoughts drifted back to the aftermath at Lortran Tower, of the guards he'd interviewed, and their stories of the Nolfin woman who'd swept through them like a thunderstorm. Holding the secret to her effectiveness in his hand didn't make that image any less frightening. Mild-mannered as she looked, Naira was a force of nature when she wanted to be. Far better to follow her wake than be in her path. She pulled another object from her bag, handing him a hefty bottle of whiskey. You've done your research, Leo said approvingly as he checked the label. He's got a soft spot for this brand. Whatever you do, don't shake it. There's a small packet of powder up against the stopper. Get it wet, and you'll have a necrom smoke bomb on your hands. If things get too heated, throw this and run. Make sure you don't breathe the fumes. We don't want you going back to the hospital. Leo tilted the bottle upright, wondering with alarm just how much jostling would be too much. Quite the contingency. I don't do half measures, Naira said flatly, checking the rest of her stores. Leo watched her for a few moments, feeling worry still eyeing him from the dark recesses of his mind. You've got this, right? With a snort, Naira's lips tugged back in a mirthless grin. I'll be fine. Then I'll meet you back here when you're done. And, don't kill anyone if you can avoid it. Looking up from her bag, she raised an eyebrow. Generally, I'm pretty good about that. I know, just, if possible, try not to hurt anyone. Are you more worried for them or for me? Both. She smiled, then inclined her head in her signature nod. I promise I will try not to hurt anyone. Well, that promise only lasted 3 minutes, Naira thought as she stuffed the unconscious Nolfin guard into a dumpster. She buckled his vest around her own waist and readjusted the pants. He was a little taller than her, and it showed in the way the pant legs almost brushed her toes. With any luck, no one would notice. Donning his cap, Naira pinned his ID badge to her shirt, becoming Quinn. Marching with purpose, she passed several guards and let herself through the door to the building. Nobody questioned her. It was a tactic she'd picked up at the university. If you didn't want people to stop and question you, you acted like you were in the middle of something important. If you moved with purpose and focus, people tended to ignore you. This proved no different. Her nose was assaulted by hundreds of smells. The hallways inside were busy, but not crowded. Apparently, in just a couple of weeks, Bradburn had already amassed quite the staff. Taking a moment, she sifted through the scents. So much Sneppard. along with incredibly high amounts of stress and fear. Though whether that was from the office workers running from room to room or from the patrolling guards was impossible to discern. The air was simply saturated with it. One particular scent finally stood out amongst the crowd. It was old and fading, but unmistakable to a mother's nose. Tazale had been here within the last day or two. With something to track, her disguise found the purpose it needed for blending. She took off in a brisk walk, covering ground easily with her naturally long legs. The scent led to an elevator, and she joined the line of workers waiting for it. Conversations rippled through the small group beside her, and she talked. Ow! Bro. I forgot I'm wearing a hoodie with strings. And Riker just noticed them. That was my chest, bro. With your whole claws. Okay, let's try that again. Conversations rippled through the small group beside her, and she tuned it out so naturally that she didn't register what was being said until a hand tugged her sleeve at the elbow. Gwen, you okay? I've complimented your hair twice and you've just ignored me. If it's one of those days, I get it, but you could at least look at me. Naira glanced over to find a sneppered woman in casual business attire with a stack of papers balanced in one hand and a briefcase tucked under her arm. She was only a little taller than Moira, and her eyes were shielded by thick-rimmed glasses which she readjusted as she caught a glimpse of Naira's face. Gwen, your face! Naira's hand slid into her satchel, fingers gripping an electrum crystal. She'd been careful with moderating her prism usage when dealing with the guard, but had she left too much in the eyes? It's beautiful, the woman said. Seriously, if a little bit of hair dye in the fur can work that much magic, I'm going to have to give it a try. Did you do it yourself, or go somewhere to have it done? With no idea what this guard's voice really sounded like, outside of the grunts and gasps he'd made when he'd taken an electrum-charged punch to the gut, Naira responded in one of the deeper voices she could manage. Myself? The woman's eyes went wide, and Naira calculated the ramifications of shocking her right here and now. The others were distracted in their own conversations, so if she supported the woman's weight, maybe the guards wouldn't notice. You're gonna have to teach me sometime. The sneppered's tail flicked, and her cheek fur fluffed out as her gaze fell to the floor. Only if you want to, of course. I understand you're busy and have a life, which is not to say that I don't. I, definitely have a life. Everyone does. And things and people I care about and spend time with all the time. Lots of people. Well, now Naira felt guilty for having considered incapacitating this woman. Clearly, she just had trouble making friends. At least the real Quinn was still alive, just a little cramped at the moment. A new scent reached Naira's nose, this one fresh and strong. Fight or flight kicked in, and her fingers instinctively curled even tighter around the electrum. Bradburn was approaching. Really, Quinn, are you all right? Your throat sounds a little raspy. Hurts a little, Naira said in that same false voice. She glanced around, looking for the source of the scent, as a mountain of a snepperd rounded the corner. No longer sporting a police uniform, but rather a tailored suit that still seemed stretched far too thin, Bradburn approached with a group of assistants and nearly half a dozen guards. That's no good, the snepperd beside her announced. I actually keep some tea in the second floor break room. Mostly herbal, though I keep plenty of honey on hand since, let's be honest, tea can be a little hard to choke down sometimes, even when it's good for you. I could make you some? Bradburn's entourage joined the crowd, and Naira intentionally turned towards her new friend. The crystal in her hand was undamaged, but she could feel the energy inside seeking an outlet. This man had things to answer for. He was close enough she could reach him in 2 strides, grab him by the throat, and... And what, exactly? Get dogpiled by 6 guards? A burst of Aurum, followed with Aquam and Electrum, she could take care of all 6. What of the other hundreds of guards on site? What would happen to Leo if she started a fight? Worse, what would happen to her family? No, as much as she wanted to confront Bradburn right here and now and be done with this, it wasn't the right time. Salatra was unsatisfied with this line of reasoning, and her veins pulsed with lightning that Naira wouldn't let her release. She needed to wait. Her time would come. "I'd like some tea," she whispered in an intentionally hoarse voice. Quinn's friend brightened, and she nodded so eagerly that she had to push her glasses back to keep them from slipping down her short snout. "Of course." A soft ding announced the arrival of the elevator, and the two groups piled on board. Naira intentionally forced her way to the back of the elevator, drawing her cap down until the brim almost touched the end of her nose. More guards pressed against her, one glancing at her before their lips curled back in a look of disgust. One of the guards pressed a button for one of the subfloors, while members of the other group picked various upper floors. With a slight jerk, the elevator began to descend. Beside her, the friend was still chattering. It seemed the stream connecting her brain and her mouth was in full flow. "In case you didn't hear me the first time," she was saying, "I think your hair looks really nice when you gather it back like that. Looks like a tail for your cap, which is cute. Oh, but in like a cute on guys kind of way. It's a good thing, I promise." She let out a nervous laugh, hugging her stack of papers to her chest as she readjusted her glasses with her shoulder. Leaning in, she whispered, "You should let it out from under the cap more often." "Thanks," Naira rasped, anxious about saying anything when Bradburn was literally close enough to touch. His back was to her, and he was engaged in conversation with an oddly familiar guard. Scrutinizing from beneath the brim of her cap, it took Naira a few moments to recognize him. She had met him once before. This was the head of security for one of the 13 that she'd killed. Number 3, or maybe number 4? Another guard in the room wore a vest with a symbol she'd seen more recently. Lortran? The 13 she'd killed before being sent after Renetta? Did inheriting ministerial positions come with their former staff and security? That did make a sort of sense. Renetta was probably the one to ask, to be sure. The security head noticed her staring and narrowed his gaze. Naira forced a cough into her hand, directing her gaze down and away. "You do sound bad," her chatty friend said, reaching up to lay her hand across Naira's forehead. Naira flinched, almost breaking the electrum crystal in her palm on instinct. "Don't feel too hot yet, so that's a good sign." Her voice dropped to a whisper of awe. "Wow, your fur is so soft." Leaning back, Naira shook her head, trying not to jostle the cap. "Don't touch. Don't want you to get sick." The friend jerked her hand away, her tail flicking and her ears dipping. "Sorry, I should have asked first." She offered an embarrassed smile. "But I'm not worried about getting sick. Everyone knows Nulfs and Sneppards can't catch colds from each other." They absolutely could, and anyone who said otherwise was spreading old wives' tales. However, now was neither the time nor the place to correct her. "And Minister Paddock, sir?" Bradburn's primary guard asked in a partially hushed tone. "He'll come around," Bradburn growled. "I'm not giving him a choice. He had his chance. Either he adapts, or we remove him from the picture." "You're sure that his forces will listen?" "If they don't, I have you." The guard scowled at that, but wasn't given time to reply as the elevator jerked to a stop. With an all-too-happy ding, the doors opened up to a subfloor, and Bradburn and his posse filed out of the elevator. Dazale's scent was stronger down here. Without stopping to consider what she was doing, Naira fell in line with the other guards. "Quinn?" her friend called from the elevator. "What about the tea?" "On my break," Naira rasped, tapping her wristwatch. Quinn hadn't had one when she'd stolen his uniform, which wasn't surprising considering how expensive they were. Alchemists needed a reliable timekeeper, though, so Naira had bitten that bullet years ago. If Quinn's friend noticed the discrepancy, she didn't comment. Instead, she fought against the concern on her face by forcing a smile and a quick nod. "I'll make sure it's ready for you." The door shut, and Naira breathed out a sigh of relief as the elevator left. Footsteps already echoed down the hall as Bradburn's group continued about their business. A pair of guards, stationed on either side of the elevator, looked Naira over with raised eyebrows. Not wanting to give them any further reason to suspect her, Naira adopted a confident gait and resumed the charade of belonging here. The walls were cold, merciless concrete. Her nose picked up a humidity she couldn't hear over the sounds of the disappearing group. As above, the scent of Sneppard was pervasive, but new scents reached her. Sweat, waste, sulfur, and blood. Ahead, the hallway split into a T. Bradburn's group headed right, but Dazale's scent led left. The noise of the group disappeared entirely as Naira stuck to the trail. After a few more turns, and a handful of wandering Sneppard guards that gave her a suspiciously wide berth, she found a door where these scents concentrated. Bars fixed in the door just below her eye level made it obvious what type of room this was. Undoing the lock from the outside, she stepped into the small, cubic room. No bed, no toilet. A large metal chair off to the side. Manacles as wide as her hand, dangling from chains fixed to the ceiling. Blood on the floor, its glossy surface glistening in the flickering Fyrom light overhead. Her lips curled in a snarl as the scent she'd followed culminated in the puddle before her. Tazale wasn't here anymore, but the fact he'd been here at all was another nail in Bradburn's coffin. Keeping Silatra from breaking out to wreak havoc was going to be difficult. Leaving the horrible torture room behind, she returned quietly to the hall. This time, she was on Bradburn's scent. With it, the sense of sulfur and waste grew stronger, almost overpowering another scent, necrum. It only took a few minutes and a few more times of drawing her cap down to hide her face from passing guards to find her quarry. Bradburn's posse was gathered outside a room that was clearly modeled after the type police use for interrogations. A large window allowed observation, and the group of guards and advisors was clumped around it. Naira added herself to the mix, earning a few sideways glances, but thankfully no aggression. It seemed everyone was too focused on watching through the large one-way mirror. Inside, Bradburn was conversing with an equally rotund man, though conversing was a generous term. The other man was strapped into a large metal chair that only barely seemed to support his weight, while Bradburn stood across from him, his arms folded like massive tree branches. The difference between the two men was stark. Where Bradburn had a bodybuilder's physique, the man in the chair sagged as he spread out, like a rotting fruit. The guards around her exchanged hushed whispers, one pair even going so far as to place a bet as Bradburn's voice carried through the window to them. "You've made the right choice, Robert. Your contribution will ensure a safe future for Cyphus." "Robert?" The guard beside Naira snickered and elbowed her buddy. "5 Christum says Paddock squeals like a muler when the time comes." "Done! He's been in there for 2 days. I'm not sure he's got the energy to squeal." This sagging Sneppard with gray fur bleached nearly white and jowls drooping nearly to his shoulders? This was the famed Robert Paddock, Minister of Justice? His eyes were sunken behind thick folds of skin with more wrinkles than he had fingers. He didn't look like he'd received any kind of a beating, but for a man of his size, he looked like he probably hadn't received any food in some time. With great effort, he rolled his neck to look up at Bradburn. "You were like a son to me, Walter," he croaked past a swollen tongue. "Which is why I'm going to honor your legacy. When the world changes, it will remember you as part of that change. I will make sure you're never forgotten." Paddock's body rocked with a snort that led to a coughing fit. "You bastard. You never intended to let me go." From this angle, it was impossible to see Bradburn's face, but his posture didn't change. "Would you, in my position?" "I taught you too well," Paddock rasped. "And I took your lessons to heart," Bradburn said, unfolding his arms and fishing into his vest pocket. "Rest in the knowledge that I will carry out what you couldn't do, and that you will forever be a part of it." Naira's eyes narrowed as Bradburn's hand came out clutching a deep, violet crystal almost too big to fit in his palm. As easily as a child might snap a crayon, Bradburn cracked the crystal and set it in Paddock's lap. With his hands and legs strapped to the chair, Paddock could do little more than stare down at the crystal as it began to emit a thick purple haze. Bradburn clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for everything, Robert." Paddock stared, his bushy, bleached eyebrows arcing high. He rocked about in his chair, but the crystal just settled into the gap between his thighs. "What the fanina is this, Walter?" "Necessary evolution," was all Bradburn said before striding out of the room. Paddock found a burst of energy, cursing and calling after him, but Bradburn's ears didn't even flinch. As the door opened, Naira caught a strong whiff of necrum and decay. It dissipated as Bradburn shut the door. His shoulders rose and fell in an extended sigh before he dusted off his vest. One of his guards stepped forward. "Are you okay, sir?" Bradburn glanced up at the window with a grim nod. "Life forces unpleasant decisions on us all, but it falls to the child to consider the future of the parent. This is what has to be done." His attention turned to the rest of the group, and Naira hid her face from him. "I'm needed at my next appointment. Stay and observe. I expect full reports from all of you afterwards." Around Naira, several advisors produced notepads and pens, while another one checked their watch. They all began diligently documenting their observations as Bradburn and most of his guards turned and left. As much as Naira wanted to follow them, she suspected his next appointment was with Leo. Let Leo handle that one. There was a chance that after whatever happened here, she could press Paddock for information. Assuming that Bradburn wasn't just leaving him to asphyxiate in necrum. Grimacing, Naira turned her attention back to the window. The purple haze inside was starting to obscure Paddock's form, covering him like the smoke from a fire built indoors. He coughed, he ranted, but he didn't squeal. Something about this was wrong in a way that chilled Naira to the bone, yet she couldn't look away. After less than a minute of exposure, the stretching started and prismatic glow took hold as Paddock began to change. Water break. And clear my nose break. I think one of my absolute favorite tropes in stories is when villains turn on each other because they're too selfish and evil to actually be able to work with other people. I think it's fun to see evil destroy itself. Uh, he'll be fine, probably, right? I'm sure. After all, Bradburn's definitely a trained alchemist or something, and definitely, knows what's in that crystal or something. Nothing suspicious at all. It'll be fine. Chapter 44. Seeing Through the Smoke. Leo's stomach growled as he paced the waiting room outside Bradburn's public office. Excuse me. The room was bustling with activity, though Leo seemed to be the only one waiting for an audience. One aide was polishing a brash plaque. Brash? Nope, that's not the word. One aide was polishing a brass plaque above the door that proclaimed Minister of Labor. Bradburn seemed fanina bent on having that position. Boy, was he in for the disappointment of a lifetime. Checking his watch, like a child trying to guess when his parents would be home, Leo scowled. 20 minutes he'd been waiting here, accomplishing nothing except minor stretching of the legs and a major overdose of stress. Arms starting to protest from holding the same weight and position for so long, he shifted the whiskey bottle. Every few minutes, his hand drifted to his coat pocket, just to reassure himself that the cigar box hadn't magically fallen out. Hoping to take his mind off his neuroses, he engaged his brain by watching the workers bustling around him. Strangely, more aides worked on redecorating the walls of the waiting room. When he'd first arrived, there were large portraits of Bradburn in group settings, some with his family, some with the precinct, and some with Minister of Justice Paddock. The family ones received a light dusting, but the ones at the precinct and Paddock were carried off to be replaced with solo portraits of Bradburn. Clearly, becoming one of the 13 wasn't going to Bradburn's head. Leo couldn't even imagine the level of narcissism or even just self-confidence required to plaster a public space with photos of yourself. But, to each their own, it was just further weight to sink his view of the man who used to be his boss. A door opened behind him, and Leo spun on his heels so fast his boots squeaked. Another aide stood in the doorway, clearing their throat. "The Minister of Labor will see you now." 15 minutes late, Leo muttered, before walking through the door. The room inside was easily 3 times the size of the chief's office back at the precinct. Shelves of books ran beneath a large window overlooking the parking lot, and beyond it a good view of District 4. Fake plants filled the corners of the room, and the shag carpet immediately stood Leo's fur on end from static shock. A large couch sat facing an enormous desk. Looming above the desk was a massive moose bear head mounted as a trophy on the wall. It must have taken 3 people to put it up there, even if one of them was Bradburn. Tolson had mentioned that his uncle occasionally went on hunting trips outside the bulb, but seeing the fruits of that finally made it real. What must a creature of that size been like in the wild? The chair behind the desk rotated in dramatic fashion, as Leo was reminded he had his own moose bear to face down. The leather chair creaked as Bradburn shifted into a confident and relaxed position. "Parsons, it's about time you showed up. I've been calling your office for a week, but my nephew's the only one that answers." "It's been busy at the precinct, sir." Bradburn gave him a piercing look that made Leo want to sit down. He resisted the urge. He couldn't let this man cow him. Bradburn's scowl of unbelief shifted into something more self-assured. It wasn't a smile. Bradburn didn't even smile for photos. But what he wore on his face now was the closest thing the large man could produce to a smile. "Sit down, Parsons. I have questions for you." Now that he had an excuse, Leo sat down with a confidence he didn't feel. "I've got a few questions too, sir." Bradburn snorted. "Your nose is already buried in something it has no business smelling." "It's pretty easy to follow dross when people are literally made of it." The retort was out before Leo could stop it. Did he have a death wish? Would he be here in this room if he didn't? One of the guards to the side nearly lost his jaw. People didn't speak so flippantly to Walter Bradburn, and for good reason. The big man growled. "The opinion of a weasel means nothing to me." Leo had to bite off the next retort. It was too early to lose his cool, so he ignored the jab. "You had questions, sir." The honorific was honoring in name only. Leo's tone held no real respect. "In your own words, Parsons, what is the biggest problem Cyphus faces today?" Leo frowned. What was this, a social studies quiz? What was this, a social studies quiz? Weighing the consequences for only a moment, Leo answered honestly. "Corruption." Bradburn's even stare continued. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. To fully release it would have been to admit weakness, so his lips remained a flat line. "It's a good word for it, Parsons. Tell me, where do you think this corruption lies?" Bradburn was testing him, but this wasn't a quiz. It was more like an interview. Leo's thumb claw scratched along the label of the bottle he still held in his lap. Taking the opportunity to casually set it on the desk, he turned the label to face Bradburn, but left the bottle in arm's reach. "At the very heart, sir." Bradburn eyed the bottle hungrily, but distractions never lasted long with him. Giving a solemn nod, Bradburn continued. This corruption does reach right to the heart. In fact, I would use even stronger language. There is an infection running through the very veins of Siphus. While it remains, our city will languish and suffer. This city is in need of a fever, something to wake it up from its lethargy and inspire it to purge this infection at every point. Something about Bradburn's language sent a chill down Leo's spine. He was too eager, a child visibly holding themselves back from digging into dessert, though his eyes hungered for it. Leo swallowed hard, willing his tail to stay still and not give away his discomfort. I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing, sir. Leather creaked as Bradburn leaned back with a magnanimous shrug. Even the simple act of folding his hands over his stomach showcased the rolling hills of his arms. Then let's get on the same page, Parsons. This city is suffering from an unprecedented fractal epidemic. We've both seen it. Men, women, and children having their lives stolen by this rampant substance abuse. Those in power don't want to see it. They haven't been down in the trenches like you and I have. They haven't seen what we've seen. Reaching up to clear the false camaraderie building up in his ears, Leo shook his head. I don't think that's the main issue, sir. No, it's not. Leo blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected Bradburn to agree. The older man's lips kept twitching as he continued. Fractal is a symptom, Parsons. It's the pus leaking from a wound that's gone untreated for centuries. Siphus has a fractal problem because it has a native problem. Oh, seed mother. Leo's entire body bristled. He swallowed hard again, his brain struggling to process how wrong Bradburn's statement was. He didn't find words to reply in time, and Bradburn continued. We've both spent years on the streets. We know the harm Fractal causes, and we know where it originates. More importantly, we both have the power to do something about it. That's why I've called you in here, so we can discuss how to address this together. Leo's mouth felt dry. He asked the next question through quickly numbing lips. What are you suggesting, sir? Action, Parsons. Preventative, proactive action. Stopping a problem before it gets worse. I've already spoken to the police chiefs of District 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 9, and they've agreed to work with me. We're already discussing crackdown protocols and stricter patrols. District 11 is reluctant to comply. Paddock was a fool for ever allowing that district to bring Nolfs into their ranks, and the poison is spread because of it. He pandered to the district constituents, but it's a lunacy to grant such privileges to those who don't even have voting rights. Paddock is the Minister of Justice, Leo countered. Agree with him or not, it's his right to make those decisions. Leo's whiskers twitched, his tail flicking out behind the safety of his legs. He felt sick, and for the moment that gave him temporary courage. Does he know you're doing this? Going to the other chiefs behind his back? He does, Bradburn said, one corner of his lips finally succumbing to the smirk. And he's on board. Leo snorted. Bradburn and Paddock were close, but that didn't mean Paddock would allow an overreach of authority like this. He was too proud for that. Well, sir, this is something for me to discuss with the Minister of Justice, my actual boss. You're speaking with the current Minister of Justice, Parsons. I am your boss. I told you I would be. Bradburn's face settled into a full smile, and Leo's blood ran cold. The chair squeaked, but Bradburn's intense, confident gaze spoke far louder. Leo felt like he'd just been socked in the gut. The necral baby in his head screamed for attention. You had your chance to gloat, Parsons. Now it's my turn. I'm going to try to take the look of horror on your face as a compliment, rather than an offense. If it's any consolation, you're not exactly my first choice either. But I've seen what you can do when the chips are down. I have sweeping reforms planned, and I need people with the courage to enact them. I need people who stick to their guns and do the right thing. That shook Leo from his stupor. Bradburn didn't want an officer with a conscience. He wanted a puppet. Leo's fingers worked into his coat, slipping the cigar box free. Listening only to the cries for Necrol, he let them drown out the little voice in his head telling him to run. Before he'd even registered his own actions, the cigar was lit, and he took several puffs. Necrol flooded his senses, calming him quickly. Too quickly. Though he had no idea what Tarim tasted like, he could certainly sense the effect it was having on him. Feeling emboldened, he blew a puff of smoke in Bradburn's direction. Bradburn's brows furrowed. You think this is some sort of game, Parsons? Taking a particularly long draw, Leo held the smoke in his lungs for seconds that wouldn't last, no matter how he tried to stretch them. Forcing a small smile, he shook his head. No, sir. Plucking the cigar from his lips, he held it out to Bradburn. You still smoke, right? Bradburn's eyes studied him with the cold touch of a prison warden conducting a cavity search. Much to Leo's relief, he did finally accept the cigar. The chair beneath him creaked as Bradburn took a draw and settled back. Steeling his nerves, Leo forced himself to meet Bradburn's eyes and hold them. What happened to the real Minister of Justice, sir? Bradburn snorted, purple smoke shooting from his nose. I told you already, Parsons. You're looking at him. And Paddock? Retired this morning. Leo's nose wrinkled as he fought back a snarl. How convenient. With a finger as thick as the cigar, Bradburn tapped a corner of his desk. I have all the paperwork proving his appointment of me as his successor. I'm sure you do, sir. They continued to stare each other down. After a few long moments, Bradburn sighed, leaning back in his chair with a creak. He took another puff of the cigar, and Leo could see his eyes going green. Hopefully the guards in the room weren't close enough to notice. Parsons, change is coming to Cyphus. It's long overdue, and it's going to happen with or without you. What I need is men of conviction on the front line. Men who aren't afraid to pull the trigger in order to defend this city. Leo's claws bit into the pads of his palms. Tarim was taking the edge off, but it only slowed his growing anger. Through gritted teeth, he hissed, Defense of this city should include everyone in it, sir. And it will, Parsons, by protecting everyone from dangerous natives. Does that protection extend to include Nulfs? The smile didn't waver as Bradburn shrugged. Those who comply. How do you intend to protect the bulb from natives? Leo almost included his habitual honorific of sir, but the longer this conversation went on, the less he wanted to show any amount of respect to this man. I told you. We're going to purge the infection, remove the natives that are a problem, and quarantine the remaining Nulf population before it becomes a problem. And if that's not enough to stop the wave of fractal-driven crimes, deportation becomes a viable solution. There's two ways to deal with an infection. Expunge it, or if that fails, eliminate it. Leo's head swam. Surely the man wasn't suggesting genocide. Bradburn was ruthless and efficient, but even he wouldn't go that far, right? Images of the dead family of Nulfs executed in their own home flashed through his mind, killed by rare and expensive high-caliber rounds. With growing horror, Leo realized he'd severely underestimated how far Bradburn was willing to go in pursuit of his own goals. Something must have shown in his face, because Bradburn offered the cigar back to him. The man wore a frustrating smirk, enjoying the control he held in this whole situation. But the Necrol baby's screams won out, and Leo took the cigar. A fresh dose of Necrol and Tarim calmed his racing heart and unjumbled his thoughts. With the clarity came fresh courage. Not bothering to hide his disgust, Leo shook his head. That's not going to fix anything. Fractal crime isn't a problem because of the Nulfs. It's a problem because we've mishandled it from the start. We've been fighting violence with violence. Fanina, we've been encouraging violence for decades by mistreating the very people we claim to be helping. They're not the problem. The real problem is that we don't even try to help each other. We claim to, but we don't really work together. We've just turned a blind eye to their needs and how we treat them. Is it any wonder they don't trust us? And the longer we encourage people to fear and distrust each other, the worse the problem's gonna get. You don't use force to create unity, sir, but unity can certainly spawn from adversity. By the time Leo finished, his tongue wanted to stick to the roof of his mouth. His frayed nerves screamed for more of the soothing embrace of Necrol, and his mind dulled in anticipation. He felt sick. Another pull from the cigar helped, though it couldn't quite make up for how stressed his little rant had left him. Silence hung between them, broken only by Bradburn's chair squeaking as he leaned forward to plant his elbows on his desk. Men of misguided conviction are useless to me, Parsons. We want to solve the same problem, but I'm doing it my way. Are you on board, or are you going to waste your efforts with an approach that will never work? Are you going to work with me, or will I need to find someone else? It was exhausting to keep holding Bradburn's gaze, but Leo's growing anger fueled him with strength for the task. His neck itched from how long his hackles had been standing at attention, and despite the Tarim in his system, his tail was conducting an orchestra. Maybe he was supposed to have activated the Tarim somehow? Too late now. Forcing as much calm into his voice as he could muster, Leo said, I'm going to tackle this problem the right way. I refuse to abuse the power I've been given. What is given can be taken away, Bradburn warned. Watch that stop me, Leo shot back, setting the cigar on the desk between them. Bradburn snorted. While you remain police chief, you'll receive enough to meet your needs. Perhaps you've grown dull these last few weeks and forgotten how great a gift you've been given. What happens to your mother if you can no longer afford to pay for her treatment? Leo leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk and dropping his voice to a controlled hiss. If anything you do affects my mother, expect Fanina to follow. She is the only thing left... No. The moment of tension. She's the only thing left that I love. You touch her, and I swear you'll wish for the reprieve of Anima's tortures, because I will strip you of everything. The force of his own words surprised him, the vitriol and unpleasant taste on his tongue. Bradburn had poked the one button Leo still had, and neither of them had anticipated the strength of the reaction. After a slow exhale, Bradburn spoke in his own low growl. You need to learn discretion, Parsons. You're threatening the most dangerous man you've ever known. There was an eagerness to his eyes, a taunt. He was daring Leo to test him. Leo glanced around the room. 2 guards at the door, 2 on the wall to his left, and of course, Bradburn himself. All 5 were openly carrying guns. He was outnumbered, and this conversation was quickly driving towards a breaking point. If Leo didn't bend the knee, he wouldn't be allowed to leave this room alive. His eyes settled on the forgotten bottle, still within arm's reach. Seed Mother, he was going to need that in a moment, wasn't he? Leo's thoughts drifted to the badge clipped to his belt. The oaths he swore when he became an officer echoed through his mind. He had a job to do, no matter how frightening the criminal. Forcing a gulp, Leo met and held Bradburn's gaze. You're right. Discretion is something I need to work on. But I'm not your puppet. I'm a public servant. My duty is to the people of Cyphus. All the people of Cyphus. The cigar sat smoldering between them, thin purple smoke wafting up in ghostly fingers. Don't be stupid, son. What I'm asking for is for the good of the entire populace. Dogs can be fun to have, but befriending dogs doesn't make them any less dangerous. You and I have both seen it. Any one of them is only ever seconds away from robbing you of someone that you love. We need to act preventatively. This bulb is a powder keg waiting to explode. Then why are you putting fire into the fuse? No, Parsons. I'm not the one starting the sparks. The Nulfs are the ones destroying our government from the inside. The Nulfs are the ones spreading fractal like Anima's candy. As men of authority, we have a responsibility to step up and stop the danger, wherever it may be found. From where I'm sitting, Bradburn, you are the danger. The room fell silent. Hushed conversations between guards died on their lips. Bradburn sighed, gripping the arms of his chair as he leaned back. He was freeing up his hands to go for his Steris 55. Could Leo draw first? Probably, but then he'd take a half-dozen bullets to the back of the head. I like you, Parsons. You're slow on the pickup and short-sighted, but you're willing to keep your nose to the ground no matter how much dross is running down the streets. My nephew likes you too, and I don't want to break his heart because then I'll never hear the end of it from my sister. So you've got a choice. Either you leave this room in my service, or you leave this room in a body bag. Convince me not to just put a bullet through your thick skull here and now and be done with it. How long had it been now? 20? 25 minutes? That better have been enough time for Naira to find something, because Leo had no more time to spare. Reaching out with a trembling hand, his fingers laced around the neck of the bottle of whiskey on the desk. He expected a gunshot to ring out from behind him at any moment, but none came. Holding up the bottle, he gave it a firm shake. Even stressed as he was, a wry smirk naturally popped onto his face. Don't suppose we can break into this before you have me killed? Then he held out the bottle to Bradburn. Come on, Leo thought. You know this brand, and you know you have me cornered. Play with your prey just a little longer, Bradburn. Leo could feel the sweat building in the fur above his brows. He was holding a live Alchemancer grenade with no clue how much longer he had before it went off. If it went off in his hand, he was screwed. If Bradburn shot him here and now, he was screwed. He waggled the bottle again. What? You give up drinking now that you're a big shot? That finally formed a crack in Bradburn's scowl. If anything, I drink more these days. But for a dead man's final request. Good taste, Parsons. Reaching out, Bradburn took the bottle from Leo's stiff fingers. The relief that washed through Leo was immediate as Bradburn walked the bottle over to a display against the wall. He pulled down a pair of whiskey glasses. Every muscle in Leo's body tensed. Shake it, toss it, and run. Those were Naira's instructions. She'd called it a smoke bomb, so he braced for an explosion. It never came. Bradburn glanced back at him and must have noticed his posture. Looks like you could use the liquid courage to face the end like a man. Reality finally sinking in. Using a practiced motion with his claws, Bradburn removed the stopper from the bottle. Purple smoke instantly billowed from the bottle, like Anima's own fog machine. What in Fanina? Bradburn asked, staring dumbly at the smoke for only a few moments before his hand traveled towards the holster tucked under his arm. Leo dove to the floor, digging out the cigar box. Purple smoke obscured the desk as it flooded the room. Guards cried out in alarm, and he heard heavy coughing from Bradburn. Don't breathe the fumes, Naira had warned. Taking shallow breaths from the relatively clear air beneath the ominous, spreading purple cloud, Leo took the dose of prism. As his senses sharpened, his nose stung from the acrid smoke. More importantly, the improvements to his hearing helped him pinpoint the exact location of everyone in the now smoke-filled room. The two guards at the door had opened it and stepped through, but were waiting right beside it. The two guards at the wall were starting to cough as the necrom cloud invaded their lungs. And Bradburn? Parsons! Bradburn roared around a particularly horrific cough. Kill him! Removing an Aurum crystal from the cigar box, he pointed himself at where the door should be. Then, listening for the two guards in his way, he cracked the crystal and tossed it in their direction. Not needing to direct this reaction, he pressed his nose to the ground to take another breath from the dwindling supply of fresh air in the room. His hands flew to his ears, pressing them tight against his head just before the Aurum exploded. The burst of pressure slammed against him like someone had just clapped right beside his ear, and both guards cried out in a surprise that morphed into pain. The smoke overhead swirled as the undirected wind magic blew it in all directions. Leo didn't stay to watch. Filling his lungs with air, he sprang to his feet and sprinted for the door. He collided bodily with one of the guards, who was doubled over in the doorway and clutching his ears. Only a hard shove against the guard kept Leo on his feet. The guard was not so fortunate and crashed to the ground. His companion leaned against the nearby wall, blood dripping from his ears and tears welling in his eyes. Seeing Leo, he raised his gun, blinking past the tears in an attempt to aim. Not wanting to give him a chance to shoot, Leo closed the distance between them, gripping the man's arm and slamming both hand and gun against the wall. Excuse me. More purple smoke poured out of Bradburn's office, spilling out like a stream of death as it eagerly spread into the hall. Drawing back an elbow, Leo rammed the guard square in the nose, slamming the man's head against the wall. The struggle for the gun lessened, so Leo gripped the gun and twisted, forcing the man's wrist the wrong way and wrestling the gun free. He took 2 steps back to create distance, only to feel something crash into his hips and wrap around his waist. It was the first guard, and his momentum carried Leo to the floor. Leo's breath burst from him, and the prism in his system made him painfully aware of how hard his shoulder and head hit the ground. Growling, he sucked in a breath and tasted necrom on the air. Great. Raising the gun in his hand high, he brought the hilt crashing down into his assailant's skull. His prism helped him hear the tiniest cracking sound around the guard's grunt. Still, the man stubbornly clung on, digging into Leo's stomach with his claws. Again and again, Leo hit the guard's head, and slowly the grip loosened. Not before his companion came over to help. Purple mist swirled around them as Leo barely twisted enough to avoid taking a fist to the face. Reaching out, he grabbed onto the second man's calf, driving his claws through the bunched fabric of his pants and finding fur and flesh beneath. He raked through with a war cry that invited more necrom into his system. He could feel the lining of his throat and lungs tingle as the all-too-familiar numbness set in, but somehow worse than usual. He couldn't stay here. He had to end the fight, now. The man overhead gripped Leo by the shirt, hands searching for Leo's throat. Dropping the gun, Leo reached up to return the favor. His fingers tore into fabric as he pulled the man face to face with him and exhaled. Just like he'd practiced with simpler elements like Aurum, Leo reached out with his prism, and the necrom responded. The purple mist fled from his system, flowing into the guard like a snake diving into its burrow. Immediately, the guard stumbled back, half coughing and half retching. No longer taking a beating to the head, the guard wrapped around Leo's waist had produced his own gun and pushed it into Leo's chin. Leo gripped the gun with both hands, one finger jamming itself behind the trigger as he focused on keeping the slide in place. Instinct led him to draw in another necrom-filled breath. Latching onto it, he remembered the last time when he'd somehow melted his own gun. Could he do that again? He had to try. As his body spent both prism and necrom, he felt his fingers sink into the metal. Then he twisted. The metal bent with it. Releasing the gun, he reached up for his own. The guard tried to fire his gun, but it wasn't in any kind of working condition anymore. He flinched as Leo aimed the Edwest back at him. Turning his aim just to the side, Leo fired. His bullet winged past the guard's ear, who cried in pain at the proximity to the gunshot. A few more clubbings to the head, and the guard finally released Leo. The hallway was filled with purple smoke now, and he heard people stumbling over furniture in Bradburn's office. That was more than enough to motivate him, and he scrambled to his feet before sprinting down the hall. Thank Naira for being so prepared. Now he just had to run. I always forget how intense that chapter gets. It's a fun one. We're on a good pace. This next chapter should put us real close to 9 o'clock. Easy 3 chapters for a night. Chapter 45. Runs in the family. Okay, okay, Moira called back over the rush of wind. Driving helps. She couldn't see Naomi's face right now, or she'd end up taking her eyes off the road, but she could hear the grin in Naomi's voice as her friend replied, Told you. Nothing quite so therapeutic as the wind in your hair. I take the helmets off, but you're driving, so I'd like at least your pretty face to be identifiable when they pull us out of the wreckage. Less smack talk and more directions. Well, when you come to a stop sign, you want to make sure you come to a complete stop. Moira elbowed Naomi in the ribs. Meaning only the Amazonian's unyielding abs. Directions to the house. The grin was even louder now. Second intersection is Penrose Avenue. You're going to want to turn left. Moira slowed the hoverbike as they approached the intersection in question. Bringing the bike to a full stop, she let it hover there, motionless, while she slowly and exaggeratedly checked over both shoulders. I said turn left, Naomi said over Moira's shoulder. You also said I had to come to a complete stop at stop signs. Yeah, good job. Moira let the seconds drag on, the hoverbike quietly humming beneath them before asking, Now what? Turn left. But you said I had to stop. You didn't say anything about going again. Because it's obvious, Pips. Kind of like how stopping at a stop sign is obvious. Naomi let go of the handlebars, sitting up to plant her hands on her hips. I see what you're doing. No, Moira said, grinning inside her helmet. I don't think you do. Then she gunned the throttle and dipped the bike to the left. Naomi's arms wrapped around Moira's waist to stay on the bike. A startled yelp emanated from her Nolfin friend and quickly morphed into a barking laugh. It was infectious, and a few moments later, Moira was laughing with her. You know, Naomi called as they continued on the street, you get a little ridiculous when you want to prove a point. Honestly, I just wanted to see how it felt to punch it from a dead stop. The timing was too good to pass up, though. So, the funk's all gone? Moira watched the low-cost housing lining the streets whiz by. Then, she had to admit, yeah, for now. It's nice to be reminded that there's things I'm not absolute rump at. So, basically anything you try? Remember the night Ame taught me how to make cookies? Silence stretched between them before Naomi quietly noted, Okay, yeah, your cooking tastes like rump. Take the next right. I'm a good driver, though, Moira said as she took the instructed corner at speed. It wasn't as tight of a turn as Nairo might make, but this was only Moira's fourth time behind the handlebars. She wasn't amazing, but she was competent and it was fun, so who cared? We're looking for the house with the tacked-on attic, Naomi said. You've been there before, right? Yeah, a couple weeks ago when Sergei brought me. What's his deal anyway? Sergei? Moira asked. He's been family for forever. I think he started out as Dad's butler or something. Then after Dad died, Mom basically tasked him with raising me in her place. He needed to be able to drive me to school and stuff, so Mom pulled a lot of strings to get him a driver's license, but he's... Moira trailed off, not sure what words were adequate to describe what Sergei meant to her. He was like the foundation to a house. Solid, dependable, and you could trust it to always be there doing its job even when you weren't watching it. He's like a second dad to me. So, are he and your mom, like, a thing? What? Moira was caught so off guard by the question that she nearly veered into a mailbox as she glanced back at Naomi. Catching her mistake, she brought her eyes back forward, but she shook her head. What a ridiculous suggestion. Not even remotely, she said emphatically. Well, you just made it sound like a stepdad or something. Some people are into that, so I thought maybe your mom likes to live on the wild side or something. Naomi, if you keep being gross, I'm going to make you walk back. First of all, you'd have to pry my cold, dead fingers from the handlebars. Second, relationships aren't gross. They're part of being an adult, Pips. And they're often rather complicated. Yeah, because you and Rolf are just complexity incarnate. Moira could feel Naomi's snort, even if it was lost to the wind. Simple's not a bad thing either. You got anyone special, Pips? Oh, wow, would you look at that? We're here! How convenient, Naomi said dryly as Moira brought the bike to a stop. Powering down the repulsors, the helmets came off seconds after dismounting. With a vigorous shake, Moira refluffed her flattened fur before tucking her hair behind her ears and redirecting it down towards her back. They weren't the only vehicle on the street in front of Naira's house. A dark car with suspiciously tinted windows sat parked several houses down. Moira scowled. It was clearly part of her mother's fleet, no doubt to keep an eye on the place. In as poor a part of town as this, the vehicle stood out like a sore thumb. You know, that's one thing I appreciate about your mother, Naomi commented, her own gaze fixed on the car in question. She's a woman of subtlety. I'm gonna go make sure they're on our side, Moira said, her feet already carrying her towards the car. Glad to see your sense of self-preservation hasn't changed, Naomi quipped, falling in step beside her. What's the plan if they're bad guys? Moira shrugged, her hands plunging into her jacket pockets to feel for the crystals stored there. Within seconds, she'd already palmed a prism canister. I think we can take him. Naomi grinned. Atta girl. Marching right up to the window, Moira rapped the knuckle against it. Her ears twitched, picking up a faint, brief conversation. She knocked on the window a second time, and the window slowly rolled down. It was a good thing the windows were tinted, because the pair of sneppards inside clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood. The driver cleared her throat. Miss Dollahan? Anything to report? Not really, the driver said with a shrug. It's been quiet. No one showed up to drop off a letter, if that's what you're asking. There was that ambulance, though, the passenger added. Ambulance? Ambulance? Naomi asked in surprise. The driver rolled her eyes. Yeah, an ambulance came through here a little bit ago. No lights or anything. They stopped for a moment, but then kept going. Either we scared them off, or they were just having trouble reading the addresses on the houses. I don't think they really designed the addresses around here with cars in mind. Naomi gave Moira a nudge, but she'd already put it together. We're gonna take a look inside, Moira said in her best authoritative voice. Make sure no one comes in behind us. The driver gave a small salute with a cockeyed grin. Aye, aye, ma'am. We got you covered. They left them then, crossing the street again and heading up to the house. Naomi's pace was hard to match as she hissed. An ambulance? It's gotta be Todd's. Yeah, I got that already, Moira hissed back. Would you just calm down for a second? My legs are half as long as yours, and I don't feel like running to keep up. Want me to carry you? We're already at the door. Guess you missed your chance. Shaking her head, Moira let out a sigh and tested what was left of the door. It wasn't locked, and it swung inwards with a creak that made her wince. Naomi stiffened, her nose twitching as her hand drifted towards her own crystal pouch at her hip. He's here, she whispered. Well then, let's find him and get this over with. With a nod, Naomi took point. The door creaked again as Moira shut it behind them. Snitch. Taz, Naomi called. It's Naomi. You home? The debris strewn around the living room killed her words on contact, preventing any sort of echo. This place was a mess now. With the amount of shattered glass, splintered wood, and tattered wallpaper everywhere, it was unpleasant to realize just how much damage a big person... With the amount of shattered glass, splintered wood, and tattered wallpaper everywhere, it was unpleasant to realize just how much damage a big person could cause when angry. We just want to talk, Taz, Naomi called. Quietly, she pointed a finger, gesturing up the stairs. Naturally, the stairs creaked as they ascended, adding to Moira's discomfort. It hit her then why this felt so wrong. The house sounded dead. No electrum hum of appliances, no crackle of firearm lights, so any noise that Moira and Naomi made was amplified by the lack of all other noises. The attic stairs had been lowered, and Naomi's nose led her straight to them. The attic stairs had been lowered, and Naomi's nose led her straight to them. Again, she took point, with Moira following right on her heels. Tazael sat on the bed upstairs. his body the only disturbance to the thick layer of dust on the sheets. He stared out the attic window, where he had a perfect view of the front of the house, including the girl's hoverbike, the parked car with Dolahan agents, and the entire front walk. "Why are you here?" he asked, hands buried in his pockets, his eyes still on the street. Naomi took a hesitant step forward. "We checked the hideout, but you'd already cleared out. Didn't know that we'd find you here, but it seemed worth checking." "So you're with them now?" he asked. "I'm with the people who helped me save Rolf," Naomi snapped. Her arms crossed as she settled into her back leg. Moira did her best to copy her friend's confident stance. "I mean, what sort of dross are you mixed up in, Taz?" Naomi continued. "Rolf adores you, and you were just going to leave him to rot in prison? To take the fall for you? And then at her house," she said, gesturing to Moira. "And then at her house," she said, gesturing to Moira, "you tried to blow us all up?" "You weren't supposed to be there," Tazale said in a strained voice. "Well, we were, and you still went through with it. Brack, man, your mother was right there too." "I know," Tazale barked, his gaze finally leaving the window as he directed the fire in his eyes towards them. "She wasn't supposed to be there either." "Oh, well that makes it all okay." "Of course it doesn't," he snarled, his notched ears flattening. "But I knew she'd be fine, and it was imperative that Squeaker's mother's little empire collapsed." Moira bristled, the fur on the back of her neck pushing against her jacket collar. "My name is Moira. We're not friends, so you don't get to call me anything else." He rolled his eyes at her, and though she kept her composure, her tail started swishing violently behind her. "Spill the beans, Taz," Naomi cut in. "Why did you attack the Dolahans?" Tazale turned his gaze on Naomi, his lips twitching in annoyance, as if he had any right to be so put out. A single fang shone in the sunlight as his upper lip curled. "Bradburn has my dad." "Yeah, Dipdross, we know. It's why your mother's been working her rump off and going on the warpath." He at least had the decency to look slightly guilty then. "Well, I'm trying to save her." "By blowing her up?" Moira blurted. Leveling a trembling finger in her direction, Tazale let out an actual snarl. "No one asked you to pitch in, Squeakers. The adults are talking right now, so zip it." Oh, this man was just asking for a bruising. Her jaw flew open to respond, but Naomi beat her to it. "Hey, back off, Taz. She's more of an adult than you are. She's not the one who almost killed her family and friends multiple times." He growled, bringing the finger back to Naomi. "You don't know what you're talking about, traitor. The past year has been fanina, with no one to make it better but me. Or did you forget that I wasn't around at the start of the year?" "I'm the traitor?" Naomi asked with an incredulous chuckle. "At least I don't go on extended periods of leaving my friends in the lurch. Unlike some people, I actually—" "They took me too!" Tazale roared. His chest rose and fell in heaves. His tail bushed out behind him, and his hands formed fists at his sides. "When they took Dad, they took me too. And they treated us like dross." Oh, seed mother. Looking up at Naomi, Moira could see that her friend was just as horrified at those implications as she was. "So I made a deal," Tazale said through gritted teeth and watering eyes, "to get them to stop. I told him that I could do whatever he needed. I just wanted him to stop." "So he used you too," Moira said quietly. "So he used you too," Moira said quietly. To her surprise, he didn't snap at her again. No, his current anger was meant for someone else. "You used us, too," Naomi said, her muzzle trembling as she fought back a snarl of her own. "You should have told us, Taz, right at the start." "Bradburn has ears everywhere. You have no idea what that man is capable of the atrocities he's committed." "And that makes it okay for you to commit your own atrocities?" Moira asked, not caring to hide the look of disdain she knew she was wearing. "I'm doing what's needed to protect my family, just like Mom." "Then come back with us," Moira entreated. "Stop whatever you're doing and come work with your mom." A growl sounded out again, but it was Naomi this time. I don't want to work with someone who's demonstrated just how willing he is to abandon the people he claims to love. Moira didn't really care for the idea either, if she was being honest, but he would be much less of a problem if he stopped working for the wrong side. Look, she said, I know you two have beef. Fanina, I've got beef with you. But there's bigger problems right now, and we need all the help we can get. So are you going to pull your head out of your own rump and do the right thing? Or are you going to continue to be stubborn and selfish and avoid the people who are trying to help you? Where had that come from? Moira wasn't sure, but she couldn't suppress the smile that formed. She'd finally said something that sounded like her mother. They both stared at Tazale, waiting for a response. Anything to show he hadn't completely given up his soul. Slowly, he shook his head. I'm going to save them both. And you are going to help me. He was pointing at Moira. Confused, she pointed at herself. Me? Didn't I just say that? Reaching into his pocket, Tazale pulled out a small envelope. Bradburn wants you. I was supposed to leave this for Mom, but I saw you pull in and realized I could just bring you in myself. Moira's blood ran cold. The man who'd tried twice to have her mother killed wanted her now? I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not asking, he said, pulling out a prism canister. Naomi sprang into motion, but it was already in his teeth before her second step. Her body collided with his, and they stumbled against the bed. Naomi tried to lock down his hands, but too late. Moira heard the distinctive sound of a crystal snapping before Naomi was flung backwards by a deafening roar. Wind whipped through the small attic, billowing the curtains and filling the room with a cloud of thick dust. Turning her head to the side, Moira shielded her stinging eyes and let out a cough. She heard, rather than saw, Naomi tumble down the attic stairs with a horrific thump. Her ears rang painfully from being that close to such a strong aura microburst. Peering over her arm, it was just her and Tazale in the room. His eyes were alight with prismatic glow and determination. He was going to stuff her in his ambulance, whether she was conscious, unconscious, or dead. Let's go, he said in a low growl. What? He just expected her to comply? With a shake of her head, she let out a final cough before saying, I just told you. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then bringing the prism canister she'd been palming up to her face, she took her own dose of prism. Tazale chuckled mirthlessly. You think you can stop me, squeakers? The world around Moira came to life. Her ears still rang, but amid the distant hum, she could pick out other sounds now. As haunted and empty as this house felt, she could faintly hear sounds she expected of a house. It was strangely comforting, though not nearly as comforting as the heavy breathing coming from below them. Excuse me. Let's try that one again. It was strangely comforting, though not nearly as comforting as the heavy breathing coming from below them. She couldn't hear Naomi moving, but she could hear her breathing. Good. Reaching into her pocket, she gripped the first crystal she found and snapped it. The fur on her fingers stood bolt upright, and the familiar, energetic hum of Electrum reached her ears. She indulged in the snarl that crept to her face, her voice coming out in a powerful hiss. I said, my name is Moira! She sang her own name, harmonizing with the Electrum building in her palm before commanding it forward, giving it instructions to seek out Tazale's song and disrupt it. A flash of blue lightning arced forward, leaping from her extended palms and slamming into Tazale's chest. His eyes widened, and his confident smirk melted as electricity coursed through him from his whiskers out to the tip of his tail. It lasted only a second before the reaction ran out, the crystal fully spent, but his frazzled fur and spasming muscles remained. Reaching back to grip a corner bedpost, his breath came in stilted gasps. Hurting people didn't make Moira happy, but seed mother, it felt good to wipe the arrogant, stupid smirk off this jerk's face. He wanted to underestimate her? Let him see just how big a mistake he'd made. Now I ask one last time, she said, mustering every bit of her mother she had. Are you going to do the right thing and come help the mother that loves you? Or are you going to continue to run around with your head so far up your egotistical rump that dross streams from your nose? If you really think you have a better chance of helping your family by working with Bradburn, then your parents' intelligence must have skipped you and gone straight to Ren, because that's the most brain-dead thing I've ever heard. Get my brother's name out of your Mueller mouth, Tazel snapped, his teeth clacking together so forcefully, Moira was surprised he hadn't cracked a tooth. What? Moira asked, unable to stop herself from poking the deerhound by using his own words against him. Think you can stop me, Dipdraws? His hand thrust into the pocket of his white and green jacket with enough force and speed, it was a wonder he didn't rip straight through. I was gonna be nice, he snarled, but you forced my hand, Kit. Moira heard the subtle crack of a new crystal. Though it was still hidden by his pocket, she heard the telltale song of Aurum. She felt the notes lift in her ears as he instructed it to throw her upwards. Boy, was he in for a surprise. Matching the Aurum's song, she harmonized with the reaction, overriding his commands to the song with her own. The sneer on his face lasted right up to the point where his own Aurum burst backfired and slammed him against the ceiling. Admittedly, Moira had only gotten away with that because his command had been simple. The more complex a mental command to magic, the more complex the song grew, and the harder it was to modify quickly. But Tazel didn't need to know that. Besides, he wasn't nuanced enough to employ complex instructions in the first place. He might have had his mother's elemental versatility, but he had all the grace and finesse of a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer Moira had just clobbered him with. Seed mother, that felt good. Tazel clipped the bedpost with his hip on the way back down to the floor, slamming into the ground with an awful crash. Moira heard a sharp whistle as he sucked air in through his teeth. His hand came down to prod at his hip and he groaned. Letting out her own snort of annoyance, Moira asked, Have you ever tried solving a problem with any method other than just hitting it? Another crack, another Aurum song. This one was instructed to fling her sideways, so she coaxed it back towards him instead. The resultant burst ruffled his fur as it pushed him up against the bed frame and rattled the window. Tazel, I know your mother likes to solve problems by bludgeoning them too, but unlike you, she actually talks and cooperates and... Two cracks in rapid succession. One Aurum, one Fyrum. Wait, that was cheating. She couldn't trace two songs with her voice at the same time. Rolling over to face her, Tazel brought both hands forward in unison, Fyrum crystal in one hand and Aurum in the other. A burst of wind blew a gout of flame right at her face. Thankfully, she had the presence of mind to pick up the songs, but she could only pick one to modify. The flames lessened in intensity as she calmed them, washing over her like the heat from a hairdryer. Unfortunately, she could do nothing to lessen the force of the Aurum, and it flung her into the wall. The back of her head slammed into the wood, instantly gifting her with a headache. Its potency spiked from the prism in her system. As she slid to the floor, her own breathing took a second to recover. Across from her, Tazel got back on his feet, grimacing as he put weight on his hip. Served him right for jumping to violence so quickly. These people needed to learn that violence should never be the first solution. His hands dug into his pockets as he stalked towards her. Had enough, squeakers? Much to her annoyance, he caught her at the end of a sharp breath, so her reply was delayed. I think the score is still 2-1 my favor, genius. But if you're Fanina bent on round 4, I'll happily throw down. Her hand fished into her own pockets for crystals. If he was going to cheat and use multiple crystals to keep her from altering his magic, then she needed to beat him to the punch. Kit, you picked the wrong man to piss off. You know what I do to people that piss me off? I give them something to... He was cut off abruptly as a hand shot out from the attic stairwell, caught his ankle, and yanked him hard. Tazel's cry of alarm was similarly cut off as his head collided with the attic floor before his body weight dragged him down the stairs and sent him crashing to the second floor. Just shut up already, Taz, Naomi growled from where she still clung to the stairs. Her own eyes were alight with prismatic glow as she glared down at a Tazel that Moira could no longer see. Seed Mother, you're a real pain in the rump, you know that? From one sore loser to another, learn when to quit. Moira heard the Fyrum song start moments before a fresh burst of fire shot towards Naomi. Cursing, Naomi leapt from the ladder, disappearing from view. By the time Moira made it down the attic ladder,
the two Nulfs were engaged in an all-out brawl. Pictures crashed to the ground as they slammed each other into walls. Fists flew. Fur fell in discarded clumps. Saliva and blood mingled as teeth sank into arms, shoulders, anything within reach. Alchemancy seemed forgotten in the frenzy, and it chilled Moira to see her friend so lost to ferality. If she stepped in to try to help physically, she'd get tossed aside like a kit. The sound of gnashing teeth made her acutely aware of how fragile her windpipe was, so getting closer to Tazael didn't seem appealing either. But she wasn't about to let Naomi handle this fight alone. Nulfin hips collided with a small table in the struggle, and a decorative vase fell to the floor. It shattered into hundreds of tiny porcelain shards that crunched beneath two pairs of large brown feet. It hadn't looked like a particularly expensive piece, but the sentimental value was probably high. If they kept on like this... Suddenly, Moira knew how to help. "Hey, genius! You're breaking your mother's things. Maybe we should all take a moment and just chill." Her words were drowned out by more snarling, snapping, punching, and grunting. Time to make them listen. Reaching into her Tarim pocket, she grabbed every crystal she had and cracked them in unison. Taking another dose of prism just to be safe, she started following along with the Tarim's song. Raising her voice above the din, she brought in bits of Naomi's and Tazael's individual songs as she sang with every bit of breath she had. The effect was immediate. The sounds of the scuffle faded quickly until only heavy breathing remained. A green glow teased at the eyes of both Nulfs as they stared at each other. Their fists were buried in each other's shirts, and blood streamed from noses and bite marks. Swollen cheeks twitched as the former friends were both forcibly calmed. Naomi was the first to release, leaving Tazael up against the wall as she stood up and wiped her bleeding nose on an arm. Tazael pushed against the wall to get back on his feet. They both looked like dross. There were no winners in a fight like that. His eyes burned with an intensity that Moira's song was only barely keeping at bay. As his gaze settled on her, she wanted to flinch, but the Tarim gave her strength to resist the urge. "What in Fanina are you, Kit?" he asked. Letting the Tarim in the air continue its work, Moira dropped her contribution to its song. Resummoning her mother's confidence, she held his gaze. Just someone who wants to help. He studied her, as if sizing up her small frame. Then, to her astonishment, he nodded. Both Naomi and Moira snapped into defensive stances as his hand went to his pocket, but it came out with an envelope, not a crystal. He held it out to her, eyes still tinted by the Tarim in the air. "Give this to Mom. If you really want to help, then come to the summit. Help me see to it that Bradburn burns." No sooner had she taken the envelope than he started down the stairs. Relieved that the conflict seemed to finally be over, Moira nearly jumped when Naomi barked out, "All that, and you're still leaving, Dipdross!" The stairs creaked as he stopped just before the bottom. Glancing back up at them, he let out a snort. "If I don't, one or both of us will bleed out in my home. It'd be a waste. I can't die until Bradburn gets what's coming to him." Naomi tensed beside her, but there was nothing more to say. His mind was made up. "Just don't die before then," she said, as he disappeared from view. "The whole stubborn, I'll-do-it-myself thing really runs in their family, doesn't it?" Moira observed. This drew a laugh from Naomi, who cursed as she choked on her own blood. "Yeah. Honestly, though, that's 90% of their charm." Moira shook her head and fished out a few Curum crystals. "I think I prefer friends that don't try to kill me when the slightest thing sets them off." "That wasn't us trying to kill each other." "Naomi, you have holes in your arm and shoulder that are large enough for me to stick the tip of my little finger in." Naomi grinned, wiping more blood away with the back of her arm, smearing her russet fur even deeper shades of red and brown. "Yeah, and I gave as good as I got. He's going to be sore any time he tries to lift anything for the next week or more." "I don't have to heal you, you know. Maybe a bit of soreness would teach you something." "Nah, you're too soft-hearted, Pips." As much as Moira wanted to prove her wrong on principle, she was right. Moira didn't like for people to suffer, especially now that she had the power to do something about it. So she found her own way to gain the upper hand in all this. Fine, but I'm driving the rest of the way back. Yeah, I think you've earned that. Just don't drive like a grandma. Watch me. I don't have a choice. I have to sit behind you the whole time because your arms are too short. Moira gave her a scowl, but her friend's grin was infectious, and soon they were both laughing. Bleeding, battered, rough around the edges, terrifying in a fight. It wasn't the kind of friend Moira would have ever imagined she'd make. And yet, Naomi was undoubtedly the coolest friend she'd ever had. Maybe this was what having a sister was like. Despite the adrenaline rush of the fight from just a few minutes ago, a calm settled in her mind. A contentment that was probably aided by what Tarim remained in the air. She'd found family that mattered, and she mattered to them too. Happiness warmed her as Moira tuned to Curum and started to sing. We did it! Another 3 chapters down. We are just cruising through book 2. Yay! I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. I love this book. So much drama and suspense, and aggression and fighting, and magic. Hard to listen because of the way I was reading it, or hard to listen because of the content? Like, am I going to need to re-record the fight? Okay. Yeah, it's what happens when you have someone as absolutely bullheaded as Tazale paired up against someone else who is equally bullheaded in Naomi, and they're both convinced in their own heads that they're in the right. But what Naomi has that Tazale doesn't is an undying loyalty to her friends and family. Whereas Tazale sees himself as the savior for his friends and family, so he's gonna just do whatever it takes, regardless of who gets hurt. Oh, but yes, it is sad. But at least Naomi was able to, or Moira was able to get him to stop. One of the recurring themes for me in this book, I tried to emphasize something that I think gets lost in a lot of like thrillers like this, which is that violence begets violence and doesn't really have any, it doesn't leave winners. Don't get me wrong, I love John Wick as much as the next person and Jason Bourne and all those, but like if you get into like a serious fight and you're not limping away at the end of it, or like they're not superheroes in this story. They get abilities kind of like superheroes, but they're people. They're fragile. They get a little bit of get out of jail free cards with Kurum sometimes, but anyway. Yeah, 3 chapters down. And next chapter, we get to find out just what Bradburn was doing to Paddock and what's been going on there, as he's been getting gassed with some kind of Necrom something. The title's definitely not spoilers at all. I'm sure Paddock will be just fine. It'll be just like before, and everything will be normal. Well, as always, thank you all so much for coming out and listening to the story. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll pick up next time. We're getting close to the finale. It's getting exciting.
So, catch you guys next Tuesday, and we'll keep the train rolling. Catch you guys later. Have a good night.